Hi, this is Peter Erskine, speaking to you from my home studio in Santa Monica, California. You might know me from the groups Steps Ahead or Weather Report, maybe even my own bands. You're watching me here on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. You're not related to Kenny, are you? Hey, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
We've just been toe tapping like mad. It's the most amazing track. And if I tell you what, if you're not toe tapping, check your soul, because I dare say you haven't got a jazz bone in your body. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a track from the most amazing album called All LA Band. It's a Bob Mitzer album, who happened to be one of our guests here only a few weeks ago. Did a great interview. But on the back of the photograph, on the back of the CD, there's a brilliant picture showing Mr. Bob Mitzer and our guest. Well, our special guest tonight on Jazz Across the Pond is the world famous drummer, composer, and author from the United States of America. He has appeared on over 700 albums and film scores, and has won 2 Grammy Awards and has had 10 nominations. His career includes 50 albums under his own name, the winner, as I said, of 2 Grammy Awards and 10 Grammy nominations. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join us here on Jazz Across the Pond as we extend a very, very warm welcome all the way from Los Angeles, meet Peter Erskine. Good evening, sir.
Woo-hoo.
Hey, guys.
Can you tell us first? I know we got a lot to answer. We've been chatting while you've been in the green room. Very briefly, tell us what the story is about that album. You were saying there's a great story there.
Well, Bob and I go back quite a ways. That's a photo of us
Oh, wow.
50 years ago in high school. But the title of the album, All LA Band, comes from a surreptitiously obtained tape recording of Buddy Rich yelling at his band that was backstage at a venue in the Disneyland theme park. The big bands used to play the Carnation Plaza. There was a very small dressing room, but Buddy summoned everyone there, and he was unhappy with the way they were playing. And on the recording, you hear Buddy threatening to fire everyone, and he says, "And I'll get myself an all LA band tomorrow."
Right. Oh.
And are we allowed to use 4-letter words on this podcast?
Yes, I dare say. So we're all adults here. It's after 9 o'clock.
Well, okay. I'll paraphrase it a bit, but Buddy then says, "And don't think that's not effing impossible."
Yeah, absolutely.
So he does a triple negative, and then he says it's very effing possible. When we made this recording, it was in fact an all LA band, and so I thought, just for fun, a little inside joke, we would name the album that. Now the album,
that's awesome.
The album was recorded for the purpose of being a play-along app, really for educational purposes.
Right.
And so we recorded the album 10 songs in one day, just as a rhythm section, and then we brought in the brass players, and one at a time, and then the saxophone players, so that the end user can play along and subtract one of the horn parts, or they could solo and listen to it and study to see the way a great player plays it. But as we were combining all the tracks, the engineer turned to me and said, "You should make an album out of this. It sounds so good." So we did, and it actually earned itself a Grammy nomination.
Yes, it did.
And all those Grammy nominations, you know what happens every time I go to London?
What's that?
Well, with those Grammy nominations and £2, I can get a ride on any bus anywhere. It's amazing.
On a red bus in London. Brilliant story. Now, I mean, I was very, very fortunate in the 80s. I saw Buddy Rich live in concert a couple of times when he came to England, and his rants on the bus after the tours were famous. I mean, my father was a professional drummer, and he was a Gene Krupa fan. I was a Buddy Rich fan, and so we always had this little bit of a ding dong, bit of spat going on, and Buddy Rich was the best. Anyway, Peter, you were born.
Just to finish out this part of the conversation, the older I get, the more I get where Buddy was coming from.
Absolutely.
I actually listen to those with, sometimes my heart would ache for Buddy because he's so passionate and he cares so much about the music. But Bob Mitzer told me one time that he rejoined Buddy's band as a favorite of Buddy, playing baritone sax for a short while on tour. And Bob was seated apart from the rest of the band, perhaps on the bus, and Buddy was yelling at all the younger guys. And he wasn't yelling at Bob, and Bob had nothing to do, because Bob was just there as a favor. So anyway, Bob told me that when Buddy was finished, he walked back towards the rear of the bus, and when he saw Bob, he just looked at Bob and winked. Um,
A lot of bluster.
yeah, there was a method to his madness.
Absolutely.
Right, let's crack on. We've got so much to talk about. We're talking about you, sir. Right, Peter, you were born in Summers Point in New Jersey, United States of America. You began playing drums at the tender age of 4. We seem to have a lot of artists at the moment that were 4. And Bob James was 4 when he started playing, which is the magical age, which is fabulous. You started playing at the age of... You graduated from the Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan. And there's a great... Look at the pictures there. This is fabulous. And then studied percussion at the Indiana University. This is very quickly. Tell us more about your childhood, your father, and why at the age of 4, how you were introduced to drums, please, sir.
My father was a psychiatrist, but growing up he played the bass, and I was the one of 4 children who seemed to respond to the jazz record playing on the family record player. I was going to say stereo, but I'm pretty sure it was mono.
Mono.
And my parents were entirely supportive, as were my siblings. So you imagine, I mean, I loved playing the drums, and I would practice at all hours, usually before school, and wake everybody up with my drumming. And then my parents went to great lengths, literally, I mean, driving me halfway across the country to some of the first jazz summer camps. I'm pictured here with Louis Hayes, who was the drummer with Cannonball Adderley's sextet at the time. And this was the Stan Kenton Summer Jazz Camp. Here I am, that's Sam Donahue on the right. You can see Marvin Stamm. Right there behind me with the pompadour. And so there I am with Donald Byrd. Jazz musicians were my best friends when I was growing up. And, I'm sorry, I'll just show you a couple more. There I am with Oliver Nelson.
Get out of here.
Lovely man.
Yes.
And, here's a nice one. Fast forwarding quite a few years, here I am with the great and one and only Ron Carter.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So, I just feel very blessed to have received so much enjoyment and inspiration from the men and women who created this music. And they paid it forward, and now I get to do that as a teacher at the Thornton School of Music at the University of Southern California. And in between all that time, I've done a lot of traveling, a lot of playing, and still feel like a kid when I get behind the drums. Which is where I am right now, by the way.
Yay!
Yay!
Well, Peter, I will tell you, and as Roger and I have gone through your massive, bio, and it's almost daunting. As a matter of fact, I don't know. I think it's a SQL Server database that you've got on your webpage. But it's the database of all of your projects that you participated on. That's mind-blowing. I could sit there and type stuff in, and I keep trying to find somebody you haven't played with. But there's 2 things that were very pivotal in your young age. You have already mentioned you were at age 7 when you attended the Stan Kenton Band Camp. And I'm blown away by the fact that you met Keith Jarrett, Don Grolnick, David Sanborn, Randy Brecker, and of course Bob Mentzer at band camp. And then of course what then went on, as Roger mentioned, Interlochen, where you and Bob were brought back together and reunited. And it's amazing how many of these people you have had. They've been your contacts, your peers, and your friends for decades. It's just it's absolutely amazing.
Actually, I met Bob at Interlochen, and at those summer camps. We were all vaguely aware of one another. I didn't really put all the, connect all the dots until I would run into Randy Brecker years later, or David Sanborn. And Keith Jarrett and I shared a good chuckle, remembering all the way back to 1961. And in fact, Don Grolnick and Keith Jarrett were roommates at that camp.
Wow. It's crazy.
And you know why? It's an interesting reason. As they were looking through all the applications, they were the only two students who happened to mention that they were fond of reading the poetry of E. E. Cummings.
Get out of here. That's
So,
odd.
so they just said, well, that's a good matchup.
Yeah, if you don't like capital letters, we'll just put you together. It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Well, Peter, the one thing I wanted to bring up though is that so you start your professional, not to flash forward too much, but you start your professional career in 1972 at the tender age of 18 when you joined the Stan Kenton Orchestra. 4 years later, when you had hair, 4 years later, you joined Maynard Ferguson for 3 years and you record two projects in 1977, Conquistador and New Vintage, and then Carnival in 1978. In 78, you joined Weather Report. I'm still blown away by that and have been for years. After, I might add, being recruited by the legendary bassist Jaco Pastorius. You performed with Weather Report for 4 years and recorded 4 albums, including Mr. Gone in 78, 830 in 1979, Night Passage in 1980, and of course, Weather Report in 1982. You also have the distinction of having the longest tenure as drummer with the band. Now, in 1981, you joined Jaco Pastorius and his band, performing on 3 projects, including his monster project, Word of Mouth. Incredible project. In 1983, you joined the legendary band Steps Ahead for 4 years, performing on 3 of their first 3 projects as Steps Ahead. That was Steps Ahead in 1983, Modern Times in 84, and Magnetic in 86. Now, Peter, I would say, in my humble opinion, I cannot think of too many musicians who in a 14-year period have worked with a more impressive list of legendary groups. But I might say, could it just be that you couldn't hold a job? I mean, really, Peter?
Well, itinerant jazz musicians do tend to move around. Here's a funny photo of my first morning in Japan as the new drummer with Weather Report. You can see the poster. That was Alex Acuna, and then they realized Alex wouldn't be
He's
on
not
the tour.
there. He's not going to be here, so we're just going to black it out or white it out.
And yeah, it was a marvelous opportunity to get to play with them, and I have Jaco to thank for recommending me to the gig, and then I have a trumpet player on Maynard's band who called Jaco to come to the gig. A trumpet player named Ron Tooley. I have him to thank for connecting those dots. So I just heard a lovely quote that let me see. Talent plus hard work equals luck. Or I might be paraphrasing, but I was very fortunate, and sometimes it was a matter of being in a good place at a good time.
Right.
And I think one of the best blessings I may have had as a drummer was that my father gave me a pretty good amount of confidence, and drummers we're a little bit like the folks that drive buses or the pilots of airplanes. People want to feel a sense of confidence in us and get a sense of ownership from us. So, Weather Report was daunting, and Joe in particular came from that bebop school. If he could smell blood, kind of the Miles thing. Like a shark, they would swim towards it and eat or be eaten kind of thing. And I had enough innate confidence in myself that I didn't find it too soul crushing to tempted to put my tail between my legs. And in fact, when my audition consisted of a single question and a telephone call. A manager called while I was on the road with Maynard Ferguson and said, Joe Zawinul just would like to know one thing. I said, sure, what? And he said, he wants to know, can you play the beat to the song Nubian Sundance? And, I'm 23 years old without even thinking. I just replied, I said, yeah, you tell Joe I can play the shit out of it. And they said, okay, thank you very much. And so they hired me based on that.
Excellent.
That's
What we're going to
amazing.
do then, I'm just going to very, very quickly, because we're going to play another track of yours because time is of the essence here. You have played, ready? Now, I mean, we could talk for 2 hours, but very, very briefly. Stan Kenton, Weather Report, Steely Dan. Yes, live in America, Steely Dan. What a great concert. You played
Mhm.
Steely Dan, so Donald Fagen, Walter Becker, Steps Ahead, Barbra Streisand. On this wall here of CDs, you must appear in most of these CDs here.
Well, this is okay. This is hilarious because I'd done 4 albums with Barbra Streisand. Sometimes only playing 1 tune or 2 tunes per record. But on the 4th album recording session, I finally decided, I should say hi to her at least because she's recording in the same
Right.
set of rooms, but she'd be in a ISO booth and I'd be with the orchestra playing the drums. And she happened to walk in while we were overdubbing. They wanted a slightly bigger drum fill, so they were going to punch me in. They liked everything else. So the producer's speaking to me. We finish it. Okay, thank you, Peter. We're done. So I pick up my things and I decide to walk through the control room at Capitol Studios, and Barbra Streisand was speaking to one of the other producers, Babyface. And I said, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I'm leaving. But I just wanted to thank you, Miss Streisand, for all the pleasure, all the enjoyment your wonderful singing has brought me. And I'll never forget. You know what she said to me?
Go on.
She said, your name is Peter, right? I said, yes, thank you. That was it.
Hey, but you could say you're on a first name basis with her. I mean,
Yeah, we almost had lunch together. But,
Okay, let's crack on. Main number: Joni Mitchell, Kenny Wheeler, Freddie Hubbard, Michael Brecker, Chris Standring. We interviewed Chris a few months ago, and the wonderful album "Wonderful World" you played. You were the part of that one there. Great one. Joe Henderson, Diane Krauss, Mentor. Now, what we are going to do now momentarily, because we've just got to play this. We've picked an album of yours, Transition. Okay.
Goodness.
Yeah. But we're going to very, very quickly. We're going to edit this down. We're going to play a drum solo at the beginning of Lions, Tigers, and Bears, and then we're going to segue into the wonderful Latin piece of Corazon. I think it's pronounced Corazon. Yes.
Corazon.
Corazon.
Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful thing. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us here on Just Across. Right. We've still got so much to get through. Stay with us here on Just Across the Pond. Have a listen to this.
Welcome back to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. We just listened to two tracks from multi-Grammy winner Peter Erskine's exceptional 1987 project, Transition. We heard the intro to Lions and Tigers and Bears, which features a tremendous drum solo by Peter, followed by the track Corazon. Peter, I must mention.
I want you and all the listeners to know, and you don't have to hold the album cover up one more time, but Branford Marsalis's website had an informal poll a few years back for the worst jazz album cover in history, and I'm delighted to tell you that that album was selected and voted as being the worst jazz album cover
Well,
in
Peter,
history.
as a consolation, I have to mention that the picture of you on the cover of Transition, I owned that same sweater you were wearing. It's a small world, brother. But Peter, as we look back at your stunning career, we would be remiss if we didn't also include your invitations to appear as a soloist with multiple world-class orchestras, including the Los Angeles and the Helsinki Philharmonic Orchestras, the Chicago and the BBC Symphonies, the Tokyo Metropolitan Symphony, and the Oslo and the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestras, just to mention a few. So if you would, as you switch from jazz trios to small ensembles to big bands and into the grandeur of symphony halls, how does your approach in preparation change across such a vast spectrum, or does it?
You know, people are going to think that we set all this up, but I have a photo album. Just so you know how I'm doing this, I have an iPad here, so I can just pick this stuff up.
Brilliant.
And yeah, that was when I did it with the LA Phil. Actually, got some
Toby
nice
and Erskine. Yeah.
You know, when I was studying the drum set, I was also studying classical percussion, and as a child, you know, watching Leonard Bernstein with the New York Philharmonic and young people's concerts. For quite a few years, I wanted to be an orchestral percussionist, and so when I went to Interlochen Arts Academy, you know, getting to play in a symphony orchestra for the entire school year was just an unbelievable treat. And I loved the music, and I studied at Indiana University with a classical percussionist, Professor George Gaber.
Oh my!
Everything that he taught me, you know, informed my drum set drumming. Primarily things to do with touch. You know, I went on the road after 1 year of college. I dropped out of school. Went on the road with Kenton, and then came back to college. And the Kenton band was a pretty hard hitting band, and Gaber, being from an orchestral background, was concerned about my touch. I was hitting the instrument.
Or lack thereof.
Lack thereof, very much lack thereof. So one day at a lesson, he stopped me, whatever I was doing on the snare drum or pad, and he handed me a triangle beater. He held it and he handed it to me, and he pointed to a triangle, and he said, mezzo piano, you get one chance. And so I tapped it. He took a puff on a cigar, shook his head. He went, so that was too loud. Now get out. And he threw me out. And so just to, you know, show you very quickly what I began practicing with the realization that I had to work on this stuff was,
oh wow,
whole notes. How softly could I play and how consistently? And started, you know, concentrating on tone. And I've come to the point now where I think tone is the most important part of making music, that it affects the flow of rhythm. You know, everyone always thinks, oh, drums, rhythm is the most important thing. That's the obvious important thing, but tone really informs so much. And so that's what all the orchestral training did. It gave me an appreciation for tone. And so doing these concerto performances with orchestras, yeah, it's just a very big band, you know.
Absolutely. The biggest of big bands.
Yeah.
The biggest of big bands. You
Brilliant.
Well,
Well,
Peter, I was classically trained on clarinet and bassoon, and so I fully appreciate the experience of getting up and playing with the symphony. Not that I played with the symphony, but in a very, very large band, as I would call it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can fully appreciate it. Roger, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's pretty sick. In 2005, you featured on Kate Bush's album Ariel, where you teamed up with Diana Krall, Queen Latifah, Linda Ronstadt, as well as a Scottish and Finnish classical orchestra. And my question to you, conscious we're of time, but my question to you is, Kate Bush, a British icon with Wuthering Heights back in 1977 and 78. How did this introduction to Kate Bush, how did that happen, sir?
Well, that was thanks to the British composer Mark Anthony Turnage and the good people at the BBC. They had invited me over to do a project where we were going to add drums to an orchestral piece of Mark's that didn't have drum sets specifically written in. And they documented the rehearsal process, and we performed it at some venue in, what was it? Where did we do it? Terrible smelling place. That's all I remember.
Lubbock, Texas. I don't know.
So anyway, the phone rang in my wife's office sometime later, and she called me and she said, Kate Bush on the phone? So I said, Kate? She goes, is this Peter? And I said, yeah. And she's, lovely to meet you. I just watched a BBC program of you working with an orchestra, and I think it would be interesting to work with you on this new album I'm doing.
Wow. Okay.
And so it was not only Kate Bush, but then Elvis Costello contacted me out of the blue. And I wound up doing 2 albums, actually 3 albums now with him. I just worked with Elvis and Burt Bacharach, which was astonishing. I had plans. In fact, I canceled a trip to London so I wouldn't miss this one evening of recording at Capitol Studios. And Vince Mendoza did the writing. And I have to tell you both, of all the things I've gotten to do, getting to work with Burt Bacharach in the booth, and
I can imagine.
He was sharp as a tack. He was very articulate and specific with what he wanted. It was just not only a thrill, it was a pleasure to work with him and Elvis. And this was thanks to classical music. So everything's, it's all music.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that Elvis Costello, of course, is married to Diane Krall, and of course they're very, very good friends with Burt Bacharach. So the connection is all there. It's amazing, the interweaving. Now we've got about 10 minutes left, and we've still got so much to get through. And Kevin, over to you, sir.
Yeah, Peter. Over the years, you've composed original music scores for film and theater, and I wanted to point out to our viewers that in 1987, the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle awarded your score for A Midsummer Night's Dream as the best original musical score. In 1989, your score for the American Conservatory Theater's production of Twelfth Night was awarded Best Dramatic Score by the Bay Area Drama Critics Circle. So my first question, what was the impetus to begin scoring for film and theater? And secondly, what were the challenges you had to overcome as you approached this endeavor?
Well, I've always been a fan of film music, and I'm a fan of the theater. And my best friend from high school, a gentleman named Jack Fletcher, contacted me when I was still living in New York, and he said, hey, I wonder if you'd be interested in writing some music for and I just said, yes.
Regardless of what it is.
And that was for Richard II. And I found it very helpful. I'm not a composer of with any discipline and with very few technical skills, but with the power of the text, in these cases Shakespeare's text, it was quite easy to come up with themes, and we again, tone in a different sense. We figured out the tone for the plays, and so Twelfth Night, for example, we went with very much kind of a calypso vibe, and Midsummer Night's Dream was more of a Dr. Seuss type, a fun sort of fairy tale. Um, and so these projects really just helped my writing quite a bit. And Joe Zawinul, who was not one for being very generous, always with compliments, um, was uh, quite nice about this theater music. I played him some of it, and he said he was in a particularly nice mood one day, and he said, "You know, you write in the Viennese tradition." And I'm not sure what that meant, but he gave me a tremendous piece of advice. So if we have any budding composers listening, Joe said, you like to write in the, because you're not a keyboard player, so you write in the keys you're comfortable in, the key of C, the key of F, the key of G. I said, yeah. He said, try writing in a key that you're completely not comfortable with.
Bingo.
He said, the next time you sit at the piano, start off in F sharp. And he said, if nothing else happens, just by accident, you're going to come up with some harmonic surprises.
Yeah, stumble across them.
Yeah, because he said I can hear your hands kind of falling into patterns, and that was really excellent advice. And to this day, I use that. And the other great composing advice I got from my buddy Vince Mendoza, and that was reminding me that the most important part of the pencil is the eraser.
Ooh, great, brilliant. Brilliant. Right. Okay. Last question from myself. I know Kevin's got a last question as well, because I said this is the way it works. In 2011, you appeared on stage at the Royal Opera House here in good old Blighty in London, England, in the new opera of Annie Nicole. Again, very briefly, can you tell us more about that, sir?
Again, this was all thanks to Mark Anthony Turnage, who was the enfant terrible, the bad boy of the British classical music scene, and now he's matured into being one of the great masters of contemporary music. And Mark likes jazz. He was a big Weather Report fan. And one of the fun things about doing Anna Nicole, it was a hilarious production. I had fun just playing it, but my rhythm section mate was none other than John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin fame.
Yeah.
And so that was a thrill. Everything that we played for that piece was, for the most part, written. I mean, the drummer always has some freedom to create, but there was one afternoon while we were waiting to go on stage, we had a small portable rig of a bass amp on a set of wheels and a drum set that I could stand up and play, and we started jamming, just John Paul and myself, and I got to experience that wide British beat. It's something that I got a very good taste of that on the Kate Bush album with John Giblin playing bass, but with John Paul Jones playing, it was an astonishing experience. For just a few seconds, I was like, "Wow, this is what it's like." So that's my greatest memory, and everyone in the Covent Garden Orchestra, they were just wonderful to work with. That was a lot of fun.
Kevin, last question for you, sir.
Well, really, it's not a last question. I was going to ask you about, I wanted you to talk about John Grolnick. But Peter, given that we only have, because that's an entire show unto itself, I love the man, and I wanted to ask you a question about him. But what I want to do, though, to close out my end of it, I'd like to add that I hope all of our viewers will also check out two of your projects by the Peter Erskine New Trio. Talk about nepotism, featuring Peter's nephew, Damien Erskine, who, trust me, everybody, that young man deserves all the accolades that he receives. Has nothing to do with his uncle, as the reason he was selected. He's an incredible bassist. Now, is it Vardan? How do you pronounce the piano player's name?
It's Vardan Ovsepian. He's an Armenian pianist who I discovered by way of mutual friendships at the Berklee College of Music. And I still work with another trio, the original trio with Alan Pasqua and Dara Goles. We just did a tour of Italy. We got that sweet spot between pandemic surges.
Right.
We're looking forward in the spring to also joining up with George Garzone. That's one of the most recent albums that we released on our label. It's called Three Nights in L.A.
Hmm.
Myself,
Hmm.
Alan Darkles, and George Garzone on tenor sax, and it's a real swinger.
Well,
And
the two
you can find
projects.
it.
I'm sorry. The
I
two
was going to say you
projects.
can find it wherever your favorite
Yeah,
streaming.
the two projects that I wanted to mention, the Peter Erskine New Trio is your 2011 project Joy Luck, and also the 2017 project In Praise of Shadows, which is absolutely amazing.
Oh,
Both those
thank you.
projects are exceptional.
And let me just one other. The best thing about having been in Weather Report, it's where I met my wife.
Oh my, isn't she
She
beautiful?
was working as an interpreter in Japan in 1978, and a few years later we got married.
Amazing.
So, but it's just everything's been a blessing, and I'm nothing but grateful. And I want to wish all of you who've joined us here to stay well,
Yeah.
and do those things that will keep you and others safe, and
Excellent.
keep swinging.
Peter, the
Hopefully see you on the
curtain is
road
coming down
soon.
so fast. Thank you so much for joining us on Jazz Across the Pond. It has been an absolute joy and a pleasure to have you with us here on the show. Kevin, would you like to introduce the last song we're going to finish the show on, please, sir?
Yes, let's do so. And Peter, it was a pleasure meeting you. All right, so everybody, we're going to close tonight's program. We're going to feature the song For the Time Being from Peter Erskine and the Dr. Band from his 2018 project On Call, featuring Peter Erskine on drums. We've got John Beasley, we've got Bob Shepard on saxophones, and Benjamin Shepard on electric bass. It's a great way to finish our interview with the legendary percussionist, Mr. Peter Erskine. Peter, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. And by the way, that's Dr. Like
Drum.
Yeah.
That's right, drum, Dr.
Jazz
Drum.
Across the Pond, we thank Peter. We thank you for your time, sir. Brilliant interview. Thank you so much, sir. Everyone, you take care, look after yourself, and stay safe.
Thank you.